Hey, what's up, my friends? Welcome back. What's up? What's up? You found the deal, the LOI, letter of intent, and the contract. So that's what we'll be focused on in this portion of this video. So the LOI, the letter of intent, describes the property, the parties involved, the purchase price, and the terms. So you outline the earnest money deposit. The earnest money deposit is pretty much like a check. You know, I always get these checks, you know what I'm saying? Just check my mailbox and bam, an unexpected check. As a side note, I used to do that a lot when I was in New York. I would just go to sleep and imagine I would receive unexpected checks in the mail. And I would just feel so grateful and thankful walking to the mailbox, opening it up, and pulling out an unexpected check. And I will also visualize myself pulling out rental checks as well. And guess what, baby? It just keeps happening. Not one, but two unexpected checks over this Thanksgiving holiday. And it's just amazing. That's just the power of using this and this in tandem. You want to have a thought here of what you want, your desires. You line it up with what's in here, meaning you incorporate feelings, as I mentioned, of Thanksgiving, gratitude, joyfulness, and so forth. And you do that consistently. So you might be thinking, Juan, that's hocus pocus. Who cares about that? Just tell me about the LOI, bro. Keep it moving. I ain't trying to hear all this spiritual stuff. Trust me, you will always get these unexpected checks in the mail. But let's get back to it. The earnest money deposit is a check that you pretty much give to your closing attorney, which I advise, not so much the real estate agent, but the closing attorney, that shows, hey, this is my good faith that I'm gonna buy this property. Now, I normally limit my earnest money deposit to $2,000 and nothing more. I actually had a situation in which I was buying a 4-unit prior to quitting my job. I was trying to close right before my 30th birthday so I can turn up. But the appraisal came back lower than when I wanted it. And the seller seemed to misrepresent some of the information on the lease, meaning she kind of doctored them up, meaning she was being fraudulent. You know, I caught her when I did the due diligence. And so I didn't want to move forward. And I said, hey, I just want to terminate this deal. I felt misled by the seller. These documents are not working. Plus the appraisal came back lower. I'd rather just cut my losses and just spend money on the appraisal and the property inspection. I'm not moving forward to closing. Let's get this termination agreement signed so that I can get my earnest money deposit back. In this case, it was $3,000. The seller wanted to play hardball, and she said, no, I'm not signing it. What you mean you're not signing it? I'm not signing it. So I asked my attorney, well, what can we do? Being that I don't want to move forward with closing, and she doesn't want to sign it. And he mentioned, well, according to Pennsylvania state law, the contract will be null and void a year from today. Really? A year from the contract. Really? Yep. So what does that mean with my earnest money deposit? You got to wait a year to get it. And I actually had to wait a full 12 months to get my earnest money deposit back of $3,000. Yeah, so just keep that in mind. When you have earnest money deposit, keep it as low as possible. Now, I'm not saying keep it at 10 bucks. The standard is about $1,000 for residential, and for commercial is $2,000. If they ever try to do more, like $5,000, $7,000, keep it at $2,000. Now, I might go higher if you do 50 units and up. But with my sweet spot between 5 units and 20 units, I always negotiate $2,000 for earnest money deposit. And that earnest money deposit is credited towards the down payment amount later once you close. But you do forfeit it if you try to back out of the deal without certain contingencies in place. So that's why we talk a lot about having contingencies so you can back out, no harm, no foul, and get your earnest money deposit back. But make sure you give it to your closing attorney, okay? So with the LOI, you outline the earnest money deposit amount, seller financing, meaning, hey, I want a 10% second mortgage with you at 5% interest rate, amortized over 10 years. The due diligence period, as I always mention, push for 45 days, but you can compromise for 30, no less than 30, okay? Due diligence period, etc. And you can see resources for more information on LOI. Now the earnest money deposit amount, as I mentioned, $2,000, nothing more. So negotiate until the both of you agree and place the property under contract using a purchase and sale agreement. So you might submit an LOI and the seller may not accept it. Why? Because she may want a higher purchase price. She may want, who knows? She might want a higher earnest money deposit. Whatever the case may be, negotiate to the point that makes financial sense for you. Okay? And then once you guys agree and get the LOI signed, next step is move forward with getting it under contract. Okay? And that's getting under contract through the purchase and sale agreement. So typically, many real estate agents may have their own purchase and sale agreement, or the seller may provide one, but I advise you to have your own attorney create one for you so that your attorney will act in your best interest, you and your partner's best interest. But if you have your agent provided or the seller provide the purchase and sale agreement, still have it reviewed by your attorney. Okay? Always CYA. Now, these are some contingencies you want to place in your contract. So you don't put the contingencies in the letter of intent, you put these on the contract, and they're as follows. You want a financing contingency, meaning if you're unable, you and your partners are unable to secure financing through a mortgage, and that's called a mortgage commitment letter. So once the mortgage is officially approved, that's what your lender is supposed to give to you, a mortgage commitment letter for that deal. Once they finish their due diligence, then they say, okay, we'll finance this deal. Here's your mortgage commitment letter. So you want to make sure you have a financing contingency. So worst comes to worst, and you don't get financed through your lender, your mortgage lender, you can back out the deal, no harm, no foul, and get your earnest money deposit back by having that contingency. Outside of a financing contingency, you want a title contingency. Title meaning a cloudy title. So we use cloudy title to describe a title in which there might be encumbrances on the title, or there might be liens on the title. So if the seller does not satisfy these liens and the title is cloudy, we don't have to close. Or if maybe a husband and wife own the property and you need two signatures to sign off on this contract, and one party agrees, the other party doesn't agree, you don't have to put up with all that stuff. So having a title contingency allows you to back out, no harm, no foul, get your earnest money deposit back. Appraisal contingency, so this is the big one. So as I mentioned with that 4-unit, the appraised value was actually less than the purchase price. So I put an appraisal contingency which virtually states the purchase price has to be less than the appraised value, or at least equal to the appraised value. Now, if the purchase price is higher than the appraised value, then seller, you have to bring the purchase price down to the appraised value, or we back out the deal. No harm, no foul, get my earnest money deposit back. So let me paint a picture for you. Let's say you're buying a property for $100,000, that's the purchase price, and the appraisal comes back at $85,000. You never want to buy a property less than what it's worth. As I mentioned, you want to focus on value. You always want to buy a property with built-in equity, right? Not underwater, in which you're buying it more than what it's worth. You always buy properties at a discount as an investor. And I said with 15% built-in equity. Remember that? So if that doesn't satisfy, you want to have that appraisal contingency so you can back out. So typically when this happens, the seller would drop the purchase price. But I had this happen to me, not on one deal, but on 2 deals. Both of those deals were required for me to quit my 9-to-5. And both of those young ladies, they were both sellers for 2 separate deals. They had the same mindset. Nope, I'm not dropping it. Nope. But imagine if I didn't have that appraisal contingency in there. They could have kept my earnest money deposit. But I made sure I put that in there to make sure that I could back out. Okay? So you want to have an appraisal contingency, partner approval. Now this is a catch-all. You don't really have to put this one in there, but some people do, just in case they say, hey, my partner didn't agree, just to take the burden off themselves so we could back out the deal. That's optional. And seller docs. Now that's a big one. So with the seller docs, I normally say this. Hey, in order for me to provide the earnest money deposit of $2,000, I will need the following from you, Mr. Seller. All leases, your past 2 tax returns showing the operating expenses on the property. And you're like, what? You can get tax returns from the seller? Yes. You want to make sure that if he says, oh yeah, the water bill is $2,000 for the year. Oh really? Let's see if you deducted it on your taxes. Let's see how the numbers on this listing line up with the numbers you told Uncle Sam in regards to your taxes. So you want to have the past 2 years, because your mortgage lender will want to see this as well to make sure they do the analysis. So the past 2 years of the sales tax returns with emphasis on the operating expenses. And you normally see that like on I think it's called the Schedule C, Schedule E. I think it's Schedule E. Yeah, Schedule C is for business, Schedule E is for real estate. They'll show you that. So you want that. You also want to obtain from the seller a rent roll. A rent roll is just it's similar to leases, but instead of just having if it's a 9-unit, you have 20 pages for lease for unit 1, 20 page lease for unit 2, and you have to thumb through it to see what the rent amount is, the security deposit, and it's easier to just have a rent roll, which is a spreadsheet. It has, the property, tenant 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, their names, their emails, their phone numbers, their rent amount, and the security deposit amount and notes. That's pretty much what a rent roll is. It's just a spreadsheet. So if I want to look and say, oh, who's in unit 2? Oh, what is the deposit? How much they pay? And have those notes there. So you want to obtain a rent roll. You also want to obtain P&Ls, that's profit and loss statements. Now, not every seller will have this, but still request it, because a profit and loss statement is more from an astute investor who got QuickBooks popping, and they can easily click a button and pull it up. So that's what I use now. Now, I'm not advising you to use QuickBooks starting out. As I mentioned, use your own spreadsheets to keep track of your deals. Check out our resources for that document that I use for property management. A spreadsheet that I used in the beginning, but now I use QuickBooks to the point you have enough units, let's say 20 or more units, then you can start using QuickBooks. But P&L statements to see if they have it, that's optional. If they don't have it, that's fine. But other documents you want to receive from the seller outside of those, yes, the trailing 12 of utilities. Trailing 12 meaning the past 12 years. So if it's November 2017, give me the utility bills from October 2017 to August 2017, September 2017, and so forth. Okay, you want the trailing 12 of all utility bills if the landlord is responsible for utilities. So obviously, if the landlord is not responsible for utilities, you don't need that. But if the landlord or the owner, the seller, the owner I should say, is responsible for certain utilities, such as water and sewer, then you want to see those bills. And also tax returns, not tax returns, but tax bills, things of that nature. So you're pretty much looking at the income and the expenses and seeing what the seller had. So that's what you want. You want all those documents from the seller, and you want to say, I want these documents within the next 5 business days of executing this contract. Now, if you don't submit it within the next 5 days, then I'm not sending the earnest money deposit. So if you want me to send this earnest money deposit to prove my good faith, you can edit this out. Now, if you want me to send my earnest money deposit to prove my good faith, then of course you're going to have to send out your documents, Mr. or Mrs. Seller. Okay? Now, do not compromise on this. Okay? Do not compromise. And other contingencies is you want to have a property inspection. So again, I said about 45 days. You want to aim for that, but you can compromise for 30 days. And you want to have a property inspection done during that time frame. And if you don't like what you see on the property inspection, you want to move forward. Some of the things I don't like to see that would be a deal breaker for me are as follows. I don't like to see foundational issues, major foundational issues, major structural issues. I don't like to see any environmental issues such as they have a huge, let's say, rodent infestation or a huge mold problem that needs to be remediated, or mildew, like big things like that, environmental. I don't like to see that. I also don't like to see anything that's a major repair. I like all my repairs to be cosmetic. Again, we buy yield plays. Tenants already in them, and we're just buying it to the point where we only have to do cosmetic repairs. Now, if it's something like fixing the furnace or replacing the water heater in unit 2, then yes, you can move forward with that, but obtain a credit at closing from the seller. But other than that, if it's major structural issues, foundational issues, environmental issues, I tend not to move forward with the property. or huge issues with the zoning, such as it's a 2-bedroom legally, but illegally it's a 3-bedroom, and you're doing the cash flow analysis on the 3 floors, the 3 units. That's not right. So let me rephrase that. This goes out to my people mainly in the Northeast, right? You're buying a property that's zoned for 2 families, 2 unit. But when you see it, it's actually 3 units, because one of those units is a basement or attic apartment illegally converted into an apartment. And so you're doing the cash flow analysis off those 3 units. But what if the zoning department happens to find out? Then they'll get in trouble. They might fine you. They might tell you you have to evict the illegal tenant, and you have to pay their moving expenses for the past 6 months, or you have to reimburse them the rent for the past 6 months. It's a big issue in the New York City area. So do not buy a property based upon that cash flow analysis. And so if you're buying a property and you realize it's an illegal unit, then based upon your title contingency, you might want to back out of that if it's not zoned properly. Okay? And last and certainly not least, put this in your contingency that it has to be 100% occupied at closing. So I know what you're saying. Hey, but what if you close 4 or 5 months later and the tenant moves out? That's natural. How's that the fault of the seller? I don't care whose fault it is. They had to fill that vacancy, because I want to be 100% occupied at closing so that I can get the full amount of repair credits, the full amount of rent prorations and social security deposit credit. Why I'm thinking socials? So you want to get those credits for the rent prorations, security deposit credits by having it 100% occupied, and to ensure you get the highest LTV. Because once your mortgage lender finds out there's a vacant unit, they get scared and want to pull their hair out. You don't want that to happen. You want to make sure it's 100% occupied at closing. So you have to stay true to your guns. So if you find out that a unit or 2 is vacant prior to closing, don't close. Say, hey, Mr. Seller, it's up to you to fill those units. And I know what you're thinking, well, what if you just put any tenant? As I mentioned before in the previous video, if the seller decides to make that bold yet stupid move, what if I don't close? Just like I did with the other lady, remember? When the leases seemed fraudulent, like she just tried to make up some stuff and the tenant wasn't living there or whatever the case was. I said, oh, I'm not closing. Okay, if I gotta wait a year to get my earnest money deposit back, then so be it. If you don't want to sign a termination agreement, so be it. But she was stuck with those tenants. So that was her problem. Okay? So the seller should know that too. And you should know that. Stick to your guns. Alright, let's keep this ball rolling. So if you receive a contract from a real estate agent, as I mentioned before, have it reviewed by your attorney and use your own closing attorney and title company. And once the contract is signed and you receive the seller documents, send the earnest money deposit. Don't say, oh, I forgot, or you try to hold it hostage. No, send that check out. If the seller did their end of the bargain, you do your end of the bargain. Alright? It's called integrity. Do what you say you're going to do. And start the due diligence immediately. Now, due diligence is broken down to 2 phases. You start the financial due diligence immediately, just to be clear. Then once you pass the financial due diligence, then you move forward with the physical or the property inspection, the appraisal, and so forth. Financial first, that costs little to no money. So when you're working with partners, you want to make sure you keep the money in their pocket so they don't be spending money on a property you going to travel to go see it and so forth, and you even do the financial due diligence. To me, that's backwards. That's asinine. You don't want to do that. You don't want to be spending money, especially your partner's money, and you didn't even check to see if the rents were accurate. You didn't even check to see the expenses were accurate. You didn't fact find anything. You weren't an investigator. That's just a waste of funds, a gross misuse of funds. So do the due diligence first for the financing, and then switch over to the physical. And when the physical comes, that's when you spend money. I'm gonna travel to go see it, traveling expenses, which your partners will pay for, because you have to structure that, okay? Because this is a business expense. So traveling costs, you also have costs. These are also called soft costs, by the way. Traveling costs, you also have property inspection and appraisals. These are costs incurred prior to closing. Those are called soft costs. Other soft costs include forming an entity with your partner. So once you get under contract, you also want to form an entity. So normally what I do is, when I get a property under contract and I'm negotiating, I put it under Juan Pablo and or assign, so I can assign it. As I mentioned, you can assign contracts. You can wholesale multifamily or even single family, but I prefer to put it under Juan Pablo and or assigns. And then once I have my partners, then I assign my contract to the new entity we form. And the new entity we form, I normally name it after the street address. Such as if it's 123 Main Street, I'll name the entity 123 Main Street LP if it's available. If not, I'll just say 123 Main LP, just some variation of that. Just the name, the street address, and LP, because I do limited partnerships. And again, seek your attorney for the preferred way to incorporate entities in your state where you're investing at. Okay, but those are typically the soft costs. Incorporating an entity, traveling expenses, property inspections, appraisals, those are costs incurred prior to closing. Closing costs, that's like settlement costs, that's the attorney fees, the title work, separate attorney fees, not for forming an entity, but them doing the title work for a settlement company. You also got the mortgage broker fees and the like. So those are more closing costs. And then you have your down payment you have to bring to the table as well. So I mentioned that in a prior video about the total cost you have to bring to the table. Okay? So as I mentioned before, you might have 8 deal finders, 10 deals each, 1% rule, 20% may qualify, write offers on half, you close on 1. So you always want to be out there looking for deals and writing offers. Keep in mind, if you're not writing offers, then you're not going to be closing on any deals in the near future. And if you didn't find the money, you're not going to be finding no deals, because I get this a lot from my coaching students. Hey, Juan Pablo, I reached out to a real estate agent and they don't want to work with me, man. They're never returning my call. I feel so discouraged. What's going on? Did you prove credibility? What do you mean? Did you share with them your financial documents? Let them know that you're a closer and that you have the financing? No, I didn't. So follow these steps in sequential order, guys. Do not think, well, this doesn't apply to me. I only got to reach out to 25. Nah, I'm going to reach out just to 3. I'm going to work with my auntie because she's a great real estate agent. Even though she just focuses on owner-occupants and non-investors, I'm just going to work with her. Okay, do what you want. And let's see if you'll be in the same financial position a year from now. Just follow the steps. These steps are proven. Now, don't get me wrong. You can make minor tweaks to the things that I'm providing you to do, but stick to the script. Okay? Do not deviate from the plan. Do the things I advise you to do. If you trust in my credibility as your mentor, the people's mentor, if you trust in my ability, if you trust in my credibility, and you believe I have the properties I say I have, again, I had a whole video about me, checking on my properties. And if it works for me, and that's a wash, rinse, repeat cycle, and for my coaching students, check out our testimonies, then why wouldn't you do the same thing? All right? So make sure you do these things, okay? All right, let's keep moving. Stick to your guns, as I mentioned. If you have to see all units in the building, then see them all. Now, this is with the the physical due diligence. And this is an example which I'm using. I'm just reading off this PowerPoint. Stick to your guns. So this is what happened to me once. I had a 6 unit under contract with a partner. It was just me and another gentleman. And I was in Pittsburgh doing property management related work. This was before my sister was fully on board. I was still showing her the ropes. So I still had to take the brunt of the responsibilities of property manager. So I went to Pittsburgh and I said, yeah, I'll see this property. Got a property inspection done on the property. And this seller, prior to getting the property inspection done, the seller showed me 4 out of the 6 units. I said, oh, the other 2 units in the back, the tenant must have changed the locks. Oh, no problem. It's all good. Because the other 4 were great. So once I saw the other 4, I decided to move forward with the property inspection. I moved forward with the property inspection. And I realized those 2 units in the back, the seller didn't show me, actually had the floor sinking in. It was dilapidated. It had huge foundational and structural issues that I couldn't see with my naked eye because those doors were locked. And I spent money on a property inspection. So I would have saved money on a property inspection if I would have saw those 2 units to begin with. Okay? So I want you to keep that in mind. Stick to your guns here. If you want to go through every single unit, now you might be thinking, well, I'm not a contractor, I'm not a certified property inspection. But you can see if it has roof damage, if there's water leaking, or if you see a lot of mold, or you can see if the property is leaning to the side. Stuff like that you don't want to invest in because that can be a huge risk. So those are value plays. As I mentioned, you want to get started with yield plays first before you dive into value plays. Okay. So But stick to your guns. If you say, hey, I have to see all units, then see all units. If the tenants change the locks, hey, well, I'll be back again later on today. I'll be back tomorrow. If I can't see the units, I can't close. And if you need all seller docs, then obtain all of them. If the seller says, hey, I gave you the tax returns, but hey, I don't have the trailing 12. But hey, I don't have the P&L. But hey, again, the P&L is optional, okay? But you must say, hey, I don't have all the leases. You want to get everything. No compromise, okay? And also with the documents, I had a 50 unit I had on the contract in Pennsylvania, and me being in town, normally I flew to go see the property, but prior to flying, I told my agent, hey, I need all the docs. And the agent said, well, the seller's old school, he's kind of old. He has them all printed. He just want to know if he can just hand them to you when you come here for the property inspection. I said, well, typically I want all these docs within 5 days. He's well beyond that point. But all right, I'll compromise. He's an older guy. I'll just fly up there. I'll see the property and collect the documents, and then I'll do the financial due diligence. So I jumped the ship. I was doing the physical due diligence prior to doing the financial. And again, I say do the financial, then the physical. Again, stick to your guns. Because I'm telling you from my experience, I learned the hard way. So I fly up there, and I'm up there for about 3 days doing property management. And then the fourth day, the agent says, the seller decided to back out the deal. He actually didn't have the docs. And I'm like, man, come on, agent. You listing agent, you. This guy didn't have the documents, so I actually wasted the trip. I flew up here for nothing. I had to fly back empty-handed. Didn't get to see the property, no financial documents, no deal. But only if I would have stuck to my guns and said, hey, I'm not compromising. He has to give me those docs by the 5th business day. Otherwise, I'm not moving forward. Period. With any type of deal at all. He has to provide those documents so I can do the financial due diligence and then move forward with the physical. Okay? So stick to your guns. And once the property is under contract, share the details, the numbers of the deal with your networking groups for unbiased feedback and credibility. So once you have the deal under contract and you're doing the financial due diligence, you want to share it with your networking event, so that way it can be a learning experience for them, you're giving back, but also you're establishing credibility and they might want to partner with you. And third, you might receive unbiased feedback and say, hey, while in that market, you know there's rental licensing fees yet? Did you have that on your deal analysis? Because when you went over the deal analyzer, I didn't see anything about rental licensing fees. You might say, yeah, they didn't share that with me. You know, let me reach out to the agent. Hey, are there rental licensing fees in this borough? Oh, yeah, there is. It's actually $100 per door. You know, every 2 years you have to pay it. Oh, really? I didn't know that. Well, hold on. Let me go back. Now we got to renegotiate our numbers because that expense was not included in the listing. So if you do your financial due diligence and you see any expense not included in the listing, you have to ask for an explanation and follow up with it. And I normally do that a lot. I say, hey, Mr. Seller, maybe it's just me, maybe something I'm missing, but on the listing, you had the rent listed at $5,000, but I checked the leases, it's really $4,000. Am I missing something? Oh, my bad, I just analyzed the numbers wrong. Hey, well, that's a mathematical error on your end, so I based my offer based upon the numbers, so we got to renegotiate these numbers. Or, hey, Mr. Seller, you had the water bill listed at $2,000 for the year. When I checked it out, it was actually $2,500. Well, yes, okay, Juan, let me explain. Can you? And I always say, can you please provide me with an explanation? I never say like, oh, you're trying to, you know, trick me. You're trying to take advantage. You're trying to lie. I say, hey, maybe there's something I'm missing. Can you please provide me with an explanation? And in one case, the seller said, well, yeah, I have a great explanation. There was a sewer line break that happened in June and July, so the water bill was higher than usual. But I got the sewer line repaired. Here's a copy of the receipt from the plumbing company. And if you look at the trailing 12, you'll see there was a spike in the water bill for June and July. But if you look prior to June, if you looked in May, and if you looked at September, you'll see the water bills drop considerably. And then I looked and I said, oh, you're right. Thank you so much for providing that explanation. So that was just a freak expense. So the water bill was $2,000 for the year, but it was $2,500 because of those 2 months, because of that emergency that happened. And that's what you want to do. Just play the dumb card. Hey, maybe there's something I miscalculated, maybe something I'm missing. Can you please provide an explanation? And if they're not able to provide an adequate explanation, you go back and renegotiate the numbers. And that's what you do for the financial due diligence. And you have to check every single thing. Does the numbers on the listing match the documents the seller provided, matches third party, like me checking it, calling the water company to verify this, okay? So that's what I want you to do. But with your networking event, share the numbers, because you want multiple eyes looking at your deal to make sure they see something you don't see. And that's one of the things that I've done. So I would present a deal that I had under contract, share with the team in my networking groups or my accountability groups. Hopefully you still meet with your accountability partners. And they would share with me, hey, did you ever think about trash or lawn care? You don't have that factor in there. You're thinking, oh yeah, who's going to cut the grass? You know what? I'll have to tenant it. I'll make sure I put that in my lease. So you want people to bring it up to your attention, because I see that happening with a lot of newbie real estate investors. They forget or they neglect to include certain expenses to the property, okay? So I know you're excited, but don't fall in love with the deal. Stick to your guns and don't be afraid to be assertive. Don't be afraid to say no. Don't be afraid to walk away from the deal. Again, you fall in love with the numbers and the cash flow, not with the property itself. So if you don't get all the documents you're supposed to get, if the property is not 100% occupied at closing, if something looks fishy with the leases, whatever the case may be, feel free to walk away. Don't just fall in love with the deal. Oh man, I really wanted to close this deal by December as a result of the creed. Now it's not working. Don't be afraid to walk away. I felt the same way. I was highly motivated to quit my 9-to-5 at 30 years old, and I had not one deal but 2 deals fall through, and I had to stick to my guns. I didn't make a decision based upon an emotional decision. So I made sure I stick to my guns, and you stick to your guns as well. All right, thank you guys for watching this video. Stay tuned for the next one. Peace.